Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Thank you. Thank you. It's very good to be with you all again. And before I begin, I need to acknowledge the passing of two great Buddhist teachers, Thich Nhat Hanh earlier this year and last week, Joanna Macy, both of whom were great influence on my life and brought great light into a dark world. So over 100 years ago, William Butler Yeats wrote a poem called The Second Coming, which says, "Turning and turning on the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity." So 100 years, 106 years later, those words resonate, I think. And what it reminds me of is how our history moves in cycles, not in predictable patterns, but there are times when history rhymes. And what I want to speak about is how to respond as practitioners, as human beings in a time when the center cannot hold, when things fall apart. And the three jewels in Buddhism, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, are where we take refuge. And finding that refuge is the key here. We can, as practitioners, be islands of order in a sea of disorder. And as events move far from equilibrium, as they say in chaos theory or complexity science, those islands of order can attract others to them and become the seeds for a new structure of reality that emerges on the other side of periods of disorder. So that's just giving a bigger context for the role that we can play. And I want to share a poem from, I think 800 years ago. St. Francis is his prayer for peace. He says, "Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life." So I just want to invite us all to imagine the roles that we can play, critical roles in this time of great transition. And I think in previous times that I've visited with you, I've spoken about the Brahma Viharas, which are the great virtues or the great practices. And Brahma Vihara means literally the divine abode, where the sacred lives. And these are metta, which is loving kindness, karuna, which is compassion, mudita, which is sympathetic joy, and upekkha, which is equanimity. So it's about upekkha that I want to speak mostly today. How to cultivate a stable center, a place of equanimity in the midst of chaos, and how to take refuge in equanimity. And one of the fundamental Buddhist teachings is of the three marks, which are traditionally understood as no self, impermanence, and suffering, the marks of existence. And Thich Nhat Hanh had, I believe, revolutionary and enlightening reinterpretation of these. He interpreted them as no self, impermanence, and nirvana. In other words, he replaced in our understanding suffering with nirvana because as he understands it and teaches it, suffering is how we awaken to compassion, and compassion is the heart of nirvana because it means that we remember that we are everything and that everything is us. And there is no, another poem that we are not alone. This is part of taking refuge in the Sangha. And the Sangha is not just those people that we sit with every week or share a monastery with. In the bigger sense, the Sangha is the community of all beings from which we arise and to which we ultimately return. So William Stafford has a wonderful poem that he calls Assurance. He says, "You will never be alone. You hear so deep a sound when autumn comes. Yellow pulls across the hills and thrums, or the silence after lightning before it says its names, and then the clouds' wide-mouthed apologies. You were aimed from birth. You will never be alone. Rain will come, a gutter filled, an Amazon, long aisles. You never heard so deep a sound, moss on rock and years. You turn your head. That's what the silence meant. You're not alone. The whole world pours down." Excuse me just one moment. I have a dog here who is whining to be lifted to my lap. Excuse me. Okay. Um, so I have a few suggestions. Well, I want to share some of the ways um, that I return to equanimity. And this is prompted by my friend Doug von Koss, who some of you know, who was part of this Sangha when he lived in San Francisco, who now is my neighbor in Sebastopol and is joining us on Zoom here. Doug had asked a number of us to respond to how we are um, responding in these times. And this is what came to me. So some of the suggestions that what I want to share with you are what worked for me. And I know that you have your own ways of finding, remaining, and returning to equanimity. And perhaps in a little bit we can share some of those. So one of the most fundamental ways I remember my place in the family of things is by taking a morning walk. My practice every morning after I sit for 40 minutes and then I go for a walk. Um, and I want to start out 10 or 15 minutes before the sun rises so I can greet the sun on my walk out through what we call the Laguna de Santa Rosa here near Sebastopol. It's a beautiful wetlands area that we're in the process of restoring. So on my walks, I hear the world waking up. I hear the sound of the songbirds and the turkeys that are roosting in the valley oaks. And as the sun begins to hit them, I hear them gobbling and talking with each other. And then by one, they come crashing down to the ground. They're not terribly aerodynamic, so it's amusing to watch them. Uh, and then I encounter foxes and skunks and squirrels and occasionally a coyote and songbirds and egrets and raptors. So that always feels like a welcome home to my true belonging here in the family of things. And I think of a poem by Wendell Berry who says, "When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still waters, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free." And I love that line, the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. And it's the forethought of grief that brings so much suffering. And the antidote to that is just returning to the present moment, to what is, not imagining some better world or worse world, but the only world we have right now. Which leads me to another practice that returns me to equanimity, which is the practice of gratitude. Counting my blessings. Maybe it's just starting off with, I'm grateful for these shoes that fit so well, that allow me to walk this path. I'm grateful that I have 2 feet to fit into those shoes and 2 legs at the end of those shoes. And I'm grateful for this path in front of me. And I'm grateful for the trees on either side and for the grass and the flowers. And I'm grateful for the people who built the train line that used to be here before we paved it to make a path. And I'm grateful for my home and my dog and my wife and my friends. And anyway, you get the idea. You start somewhere saying thank you. And after a while, it's hard to stop because everything is a gift when we remember that. So the practice of gratitude always brings us back right into now and an open heart. And spending time with good friends and sharing our gratitude with them is so important. This year, this calendar year, has been a time of extraordinary grief and loss for me. I have, within this calendar year, I have lost 5 dear friends and 2 family members, and several more that I'm just more recently. Another friend I learned yesterday entering hospice, 2 others with serious cancer diagnoses. Um, so I'm grieving at the same time I am celebrating the gift of the friends who I am still blessed to have in my life. And it's reminding me to not let a day go by without telling them how much I love them and how much I appreciate them sharing this path with me. This practice brings the grief down into a deeper place of holding, a deeper place of gratitude. And it reminds me then of the cycle of life, of birth and death, and seeing the seasonality of history too, and remembering that dark ages are followed by Renaissance periods. And when I recognize and remind myself that we are living in truly a dark age, then I let go of my expectation that it should be otherwise. It is what it is. Then I am released from feeling the responsibility to make it something else. And that frees me to ask the question, what can I do in these times? And now it comes down to the most simple things, saying hello to a stranger, being as kind as I can to the people around me, trying to be the light in the dark times. And when I watch the sunrise in the morning, I'm remembering that the earth is always turning toward the morning. And toward the night, that there is no permanent darkness or permanent light. And in my Soto Zen tradition, we are invited to, in fact, what the practice is to bring the unconditioned down into the conditioned life, to bring the Buddha Dharma, the transcendent, to be aware of that, of the formless, and to live in form. Because the Heart Sutra reminds us that form is emptiness, emptiness is form. And Dogen says form is form and emptiness is emptiness. And it's all of that. So remembering the impermanence as a gift. Jennifer Wellwood has this wonderful poem she calls the Dakini Speaks. And Dakini in Tibetan tradition is one of these semi-divine beings who mediates between this world and the world of humans and the world of the gods. And she says, my friends, let's grow up. Let's stop pretending we don't know the deal here. And if we truly haven't noticed, let's wake up and notice. Look, whatever can be lost will be lost. It's simple. How could we have missed it all this time? Let's grieve our losses fully, like human, ripe beings. But please, let's not be so shocked by them. Let's not act so betrayed, as though life had broken some secret promise to us. Life's only promise is impermanence, and she keeps it with ruthless impeccability. To a child, she seems cruel, but she is only wild, and her compassion exquisitely precise. Brilliantly penetrating, luminous with truth, she strips away the unreal to show us the real. This is the true ride. Let's give ourselves to it. Let's stop making deals for a safe passage. There isn't one anyway, and the cost is too high. We are not children anymore. The true human adult gives everything for what cannot be lost. Let's dance the wild dance of no hope. This is a big poem. There's a lot in there. And hope is it's an interesting word, and it has so many ways for us to understand it. And hope can be something that sustains us, but it can also be something that sets us up for disappointment and despair. So hope, I can't remember who it was, it says, wait without hope, for hope would be for the wrong thing. And if we hope for things to turn out the way we think they ought to be, we're inevitably going to be disappointed. So hoping for something beyond hope is maybe what the Christian mystics would call faith, which is really trusting in things as they are. And that's a bigger order. At night, when it's clear, and I have to say, this past summer, when the fog comes in at night, I've been grateful for these cool, foggy days. I had friends who complain about, where's summer? It's so foggy. I gotta admit, I love these cool nights and cool days. But when I'm in the mountains at night, lying in my sleeping bag under the stars, looking up, I remember just how small my concerns are. And just remembering the bigger context and remembering the fundamental goodness. So I also remember this story, a wonderful story about not getting attached to how you think, we think, I think things ought to be. The story is this Chinese farmer who has this beautiful horse that's the envy of all his neighbors. And they tell him, "Oh, how fortunate you are to have such a horse." And he says, "Maybe." Well, then one day the horse runs away. And the neighbors all say, "Oh, how unfortunate you lost your horse." And he says, "Maybe." But then one day the horse comes back leading a whole string of wild horses into his corral. And the neighbors say, "Oh, how fortunate you are to have all these new horses." And he says, "Maybe." And then one day the farmer's son is trying to train one of the horses, is thrown off and breaks his leg. And the neighbors say, "Oh, what an unfortunate man you are to have your son's leg broken." And he says, "Maybe." Well, then one day the soldiers come by to draft all the young men in the neighbor village to send them off to war. And they can't take his son because his leg is broken. And they say, "Oh, how fortunate you are." He says, "Maybe." The point of the story is that there is no end to the story. The wheel turns. What we think is good, what we think is bad, we don't know. So one of the ways to practice equanimity is just with the old Zen koan that says, "Not knowing is most intimate." So practicing remaining in the place of not knowing, of not holding to fixed views. So finally, I want to offer maybe an even bigger context to maintaining equanimity. And this is a poem from Robinson Jeffers, one of my all-time favorite poets, lived in the Carmel area, fell out of favor in the 1940s because of his opposition to the war. He says, "Hope is not for the wise. Fear is for fools. Change and the world, we think, are racing to a fall. Open-eyed and helpless, in every newscast, that is the news. The Times events would seem mere chaos, but all drift the same deadly direction. But this is the August thunder of the age, not the November. The wise hope nothing. The wise think November as good as April. The wise remember that Caesar and final Augustulus had heirs, and men lived on, rich, unplanned life. After the foreign wars, the border wars, the civil wars, and the barbarians, music and religion, honor and mirth renewed life's lost enchantment. But even if life had perished utterly, oh, perfect loveliness of earth and heaven. So thank you for your kind attention, and I want to open it up for questions, comments, maybe even suggestions of how do you return to equanimity? How do you remain in equanimity? Or whatever you want to share.
Thank you, Larry. The microphone's in the middle of the room. If you have a question or comment, speak up. If you're online, you can unmute. Tom.
Hi, Larry. You mentioned Thich Nhat Hanh. Are you familiar with his reinterpretation of the Heart Sutra?
Yes.
Because it was very moving to me, but I can't quite remember the gist of it. You know, form is emptiness, emptiness is form is very confusing and almost like a koan. Can you recall how he reinterpreted that?
How he interpreted the form as emptiness, emptiness is form. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Let me see. Well, emptiness, first of all, emptiness is not the same as nothingness. It's not the same as hollowness. And when he and most Buddhist teachers speak about emptiness, what they're really speaking about is that nothing, what everything, every phenomenon, or every dharma is what they call, but everything in existence is empty of a separate existence. In other words, everything is dependent on everything else for its existence. Which goes back to the concept of no self. It's not that we don't exist, but we don't exist as independent entities, independent of everything else. So this term emptiness is a difficult one, and I think it really needs to be reframed as radical interdependence. And Hindus have this image of Indra's net, which is this great web of existence, and at every point of this net there is a jewel that reflects every other jewel in the net. And that's probably the closest to, in fact, I'm trying to remember the name of this 9th century Chinese poet who, there's a magnificent poem called the hymn of the great jewel. Anyway, never mind. But emptiness really should be understood as radical interdependence. The way a wave arises from the ocean and appears to have a separate existence and then subsides again back into the ocean. So form is the wave, emptiness is the ocean. The wave is not different from the ocean. The ocean is not different from the form. From the wave. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Steve, go ahead. You can unmute.
Can I get a view of everybody? So, thank you.
Sure.
Hi, I just wanted to verbalize my thanks for you being here today. I daily receive your email, poetry lovers, and I find poetry for myself a refuge in and of itself. It really allows me to open up my mind and my spirit to what is, and practices of equanimity and kindness and compassion, and just stepping back from myself. So I'm so glad that you have come to talk to us today and to remind me of that poetry is a key refuge in my life. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Steve. By the way, Steve referenced I have an email list where I send out a poem a day. If anybody is interested in joining that list, you can just send me an email with the subject line poem. And in fact, I'll put my address in the chat box.
Andrea?
Yeah, I every day I look at that email, and I'm amazed by the variety and of poets and their voices, and it's just a wonderful part of my day.
Thank you.
Grisha, can you read that email for our audio listeners?
Tyler says, I love all the poems and stories. I feel they express truth in ways that explaining cannot do. Thanks so much for these.
No,
And
Larry's email.
oh, Larry's. Oh, okay. Yeah. lrobpoet@sonic.net. lrobpoet@sonic.net. Yeah, I also receive the poems, and they are beautiful every day. And then Andrea in the room has a question.
Hi.
Big voice.
I will. Thank you so much. I feel so much peace and just equanimity, I guess. But what I wanted to ask you about specifically was, you read a poem by someone who's speaking to the upper warriors, and I'm not exactly sure because they were all so moving, but I wanted the name of that poem. It was so full of just everything I needed to hear. And I sit for peace and justice with a Sangha twice a week, and we just sit, and then we share a poem, and I would love to share that. Could you tell me the author? Do you know which one I'm talking about?
The last one I shared?
No, the one before that.
The Dakini Speaks.
Yeah.
It's by Jennifer Wellwood.
Jennifer Wellworth?
Yes.
Well,
And actually, if you've written down my email address, send me a message referencing the Dakini Speaks. I'll send you a copy of it.
Dakini.
Okay. Thank you so much for this moment of peace and joy.
You're most welcome.
Oh, go ahead, Bob. Big voice.
My name is Bob. I want to thank you for having the gratitude for having listened to so much we've talked today. One of the things I've become grateful for is, in the midst of all tough times, and this goes back about 5-6 years that I started, was becoming aware of humor and learning that humor can ease suffering. I'm not speaking loud enough. I'm learning that humor can ease suffering, and what I started to do was sharing what I was finding humorous with people I knew, and suddenly they got a smile on their face, and for a moment they seemed to be eased of their suffering. And I just want to share, humor doesn't have to be nasty. Humor can just be observant of what's happening around you and become humorous. And I'm very grateful that that is still going on for me, and I hope for others.
Thank you. Beautifully said. Yes. Humor lightens the heart.
Jim?
Yes, all right. Thank you for a luminous talk and much needed. Can you tell me the name of the poet of the last poem, When It's Time to Grow Up?
Oh, Robinson Jeffers.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Matthew.
Hi, my name's Matthew. Thank you, Larry, for a most inspirational talk. Ever since the election, the focus of my practice has been on uncertainty. And I've had great guidance by Pema Chodron and her books, When Things Fall Apart and The Places That Scare You. And so I've been kind of inviting uncertainty into my life and groundlessness and hopelessness. And I just have to tell you just recently the insight I've had about groundlessness. And I felt after the election that the rug had been pulled out from under me. And it's a feeling of disorientation and fear, imbalance. But through my practice, and there's a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh's The Heart of Buddhist Teachings, where he talks in the chapter about the 5 powers. The first power, faith. He says, faith is the confidence that we receive when we put into practice a teaching that helps us overcome difficulties or obtain some transformation. And so I just have the greatest trust in the Dharma. So now, because subsequently from embracing uncertainty, life has just been throwing it at me on the most kind of fundamental levels of uncertainty about home and health. So now, just recently, I don't feel like the rug's being pulled out from under me. I feel like I'm on a blanket toss. And the blanket is in a firm grip of the Dharma. But a blanket toss, much, much better feelings of exhilaration, of freedom. And not to belabor the metaphor too much, but you get a different perspective, when you're up in the air, as long as you have the Dharma, to catch you and send you up again.
Yes. Amen. Yes. Yes. That's where we take refuge.
Thank you very much. And thank you for talking about the Yeats poem and sparing us the last line, which is, and what rough beast this hour come round at last slouches toward Bethlehem to be born. And that came up for me in the last election. So I appreciate your talking about another way to look at all that stuff. So thank you.
You're welcome. And may the rough beast return to wherever.
Please.
Larry, when I came in this morning, I was hoping to have a live Dharma talk, and here I was looking at a TV, and I was a little disappointed. But I have to say that your warmth and your wisdom came right across to me from this video screen. And one of the things that always makes me feel grounded is sharing our experience. And that's a never-ending experience of being in touch with our feelings, and if we choose to, express how that feels. And that's never-ending source of being grounded and joy.
Okay.
I think we have time for one.
Compassion means sharing our suffering.
We have time for one more. If anybody online has a question or anybody else in the room. No.
Well, I'd like to share, if I have just a moment, one more poem to close out then, to give you a little perspective. This is the oldest poem I know. It's from Sophocles, 2,500 years ago, translated by the great Irish poet Seamus Heaney when he was living in Belfast in the mid-1970s. If you remember what was happening then with this cycle of sectarian violence and revenge over and over again. So this is his version of an older poem. It says, human beings suffer. They torture one another. They get hurt and get hard. No poem or play or song can fully right a wrong inflicted and endured. The innocent in jail beat on their bars together. The soldier's widow faints in the funeral home. History says, don't hope on this side of the grave. But then, once in a lifetime, the longed for tidal wave of justice can rise up and hope and history rhyme. So hope for a great sea change on the far side of revenge. Believe that further shore is reachable from here. Believe in miracles and cures and healing wells. Call that miracle self-healing, the utter self-revealing double take of feeling. If there's fire on the mountain or lightning and storm and a God speaks from the sky, it means someone is hearing the outcry and the birth cry of new life at its term. So wonderful to be with you all, and I look forward to the next time. May you all be well. May you all be of good cheer. May you stay safe. May you be free of all suffering and from the causes of all suffering.